Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Episode 536. Joe has a book? Monday, March 18th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. The recent South by Southwest Interactive Festival was again awash with new technologies designed to add convenience to the consumer experience. But is all friction bad? And how do totally frictionless experiences impact brand loyalty? Tonight, we'll discuss. Also, the real reason Facebook is so gung-ho over privacy, the fickle truth about consumer tracking, an addressable TV ad standard at last, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Admiral himself of the HMS Beagle, author, speaker, and brand innovation consultant, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Joe, welcome back.
It is good to be back on board with you, my friend.
Glad to have you here. Now, also joining us is the Senior Vice President, Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer for RPA, Mr. Tim Leake. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, next up, we welcome back the Associate Vice President of Marketing Strategy for the Enterprise Marketing Hub at Arizona State University, Mr. Adam Pierno. Adam, you win for the longest title.
I wish I could cut it down. I apologize, but I am glad to be here nonetheless.
And finally, we say hello to our old friend, managing partner for Bindle Stiff, Mr. Steve Wax. Steve, you chose a very odd name for your agency. Love it.
Yeah. It's a name of somebody who travels across the U.S. on rails and sells things out of his backpack. And we'll talk more about it later, I'm sure.
Oh, that's
but thank you. It's great to be on again.
Yeah, I'm glad that you can make it. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. And first up, there was this interesting idea that was floated by OMD's Kate Ivory in the wake of this year's South by Southwest conference concerning the drive for convenience. Now, apparently at the conference, and Joe can probably shed some more light on this when we get to this, but it seems like this year there was a lot of emphasis on convenience and taking away friction from the consumer experience. But Ms. Ivory suggests that the drive toward eliminating all friction from the brand purchase experience may actually be diminishing brand value overall. Which raises a very interesting and obvious question, Joe. Does introducing friction in purchase decisions actually raise the perceived value of that decision? And what is the impact of all this move toward easier, faster, more convenient type technology?
So I'm going to try not to be too mean. And I'm just going to say respectfully, I disagree with Kate. And I think that her op-ed really represents real old school and outdated thinking. This quote of, this is one of her quotes, injecting friction into experience is often what lets brands make the everyday magical. And the example given is IKEA, the whole idea of actually, adding steps and making it a little bit more difficult for consumers is part of the brand promise. Now, look, the problem with brands is that they're not real. They never were real. Brands and brand building have been inextricably tied to advertising. And with the commoditization of advertising comes the commoditization of brands. I wrote about the 4 Ps being commoditized in my first book in 2004. And then later I introduced custom experience as a differentiator in Flip the Funnel. Now I talk about something called PBEC, which stands for Product, Brand, Experience, and Community. I think the thing is that faking friction is a fool's errand.
Okay, but
And
to be fair to her, though, she's not saying faking friction. She's
no,
talking
I'm
about
saying it.
friction.
I'm saying that ultimately every single fiber of our being as marketers and business professionals should be to eliminate any and all friction. I mean, when you think about the value proposition of Uber, that it's all about eliminating friction. It's all about connecting supply and demand, right? Drivers and passengers in a highly inefficient mechanism. And so the thing that kind of let's take IKEA just for a second, right? The whole installation of IKEA furniture, that's part of their value proposition, but it's also part of why they can charge what they do charge. And it's part of the value proposition from day one. Now, creating an app or creating, for example, a premium solution where they will install it for you, well, that's great. That's convenience where a customer will pay for the ability to have the thing built. And using AR, for example, through an app to actually make assembling that furniture easier is even better. So technology is helping to eliminate and reduce friction, but to actually talk about friction as part of what makes brands special and magical, to me, I feel that really, and I say respectfully, because she's not here to kind of talk back or respond, I think is completely missing the boat, and to me represents the kind of old school thinking which is further contributing to the demise of brands.
There's one story that sticks in my head, and that's the old marketing myth or marketing story that a customer that never has a problem with your brand is not as loyal a customer as a customer who has a problem and has that problem solved by your brand. And I think there's a nugget of wisdom in there about what friction does to the value of a brand experience. I mean, I'm not saying that every experience should be filled with friction and you should always be trying to introduce something that keeps the customer from the brand. But at the same time, if we want a truly loyal customer, we need to be actually interacting with them and solving their problems, not just giving them a totally easy, frictionless, no support experience that just says, okay, here's your device. You're having a good experience. Now we never interact with you, and now you go off and buy something else later.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that statement either, because I think whether we're talking about, I always use the example when talking about technology. Compare technology to sound at a concert, right? No one ever comes back from a concert or listening to a band commenting on the sound. The only time they do is when the sound sucks. So it's the same thing like technology. It should be completely invisible and in the background. I think custom experience is the same thing, or what I call customer obsession now. It should be something that is kind of seen and not heard, so to speak. But when you do need to interact with a brand, when you do need, for example, to go to Twitter or whatever the case may be, well, that's that. I mean, I wouldn't call that friction. I would call that a connection. That is the magical component that maybe Kate might be referring to. And even that, in fact, especially that, should be done in the most frictionless way possible. So whether it's I don't care whether it's a chatbot, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's a person on a telephone, on the other end of a telephone, as long as ultimately that customer's problem is solved. But to say that that the relationship with a brand cannot exist in an environment where you don't actually need to interact with the company, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that.
Adam, what's your opinion? Are you on board with what Joe's saying, or do you feel like there's maybe a balance between the friction that's introduced into the experience and the ease of use and the lack of friction?
Yeah, we're actually studying this right now. For some research we're doing into some new learning tools, and what we've figured out is they're both right. So, Joe, good job. You're correct. What I would insert that makes it a little bit nuanced from what Kate Ivory said, and I wasn't there, so I didn't see the talk live, but I think what she's looking at is when we're talking about purely digital experiences, a lack of friction creates a lack of recall. And if you think about the way Safari in your iPhone automatically captures your passwords, and all of a sudden you really have no I don't want friction. I don't, as a consumer, I don't want to add my password every time. But when I'm on a different device and I have no recall of actually what brand it even was or how to get back to the tool that I was using, or an app where I just can't even get in because I don't remember anything about it, I think that's what she was more referring to. And I can see that you have to put in little hooks so that people are remaining actively engaged in the brand and not just getting a benefit from it without ever having to do anything with the brand.
One of the examples that she said in the article that I really loved was the example of wine, and how the wine experience, and this is something that's near and dear to Steve's heart, I'm sure, but
I'm looking out at a vineyard right now.
well, the wine experience is, if we want to make it as frictionless and as easy as possible, we should put wine in cardboard boxes and have it, in little spigots. And it's just like, and they do that. But when you want to have a real relationship with a vineyard or a specific wine, you want it to be in a bottle with a cork and not a screw top. And you want to have specific things that recognize the fact that this is a premium experience that I want to enjoy, and I want to enjoy with all the senses. And that's counterintuitive to the idea that we should make everything frictionless. And I know that technology is not the same as wine, but Steve, I mean, is there a truth in the fact that by making things a little bit more difficult to enjoy, you actually increase the value? Is there any truth in that, or are we moving more toward this balanced state between the two?
I first I didn't research that question as you had instructed, sorry. But my first, no, I was on another question and I got kind of obsessed with Facebook.
Don't admit it.
Anyway, when I first read that, I thought she was talking about just pure old-fashioned advertising, that if, like native content or something, you had to read through to get to the link to click through to buy the product. I thought she was talking about that kind of friction. There are interesting examples, however, of technology, ease getting in your way. Like, we all use Google Maps to drive. I've been living where I'm living now 2.5 years, and I still get lost when I don't have Google Maps, because when I use Google Maps, I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just looking at a screen. And I don't know if that's a correct analogy, but I do know that, like, I have a friend that's the publisher of Heyday Books, which is a fabulous book publisher, and their books are incredibly beautiful. And so it's this whole thing of, rather than reading on a Kindle or listening to a podcast, or rather an audible broadcast, I can buy this extraordinary book that may just be all type, but I like holding it and feeling it and stuff. And that's analogous to the wine experience. I don't think that's like a speed bump. I think it's more something you enjoy that somehow immerses you in the experience of the brand.
And actually, to that point, the examples that she cites, and even the one you just cited, they're all very physical, tactile examples. So that I feel is a different topic, because Adam, it's actually the opposite of what you were referring to, because she's talking about like the San Pellegrino bottle and the actual physical act of assembling furniture. But I think I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's great that you would want to open up a bottle of wine and do it with an old-fashioned corkscrew, as opposed to one of those rabbits or quite frankly, a screw top. There's something about a perception of quality, but of course that's changing with respect to a screw top versus an good old-fashioned cork, and opening it up with a little bit of elbow grease. But I think that's fine. I think no one is asking to create such a frictionless, convenient consumption experience for something like wine that would, and in doing so would almost kind of dilute or diminish, that physical, enjoyment from actually, consuming the product.
Tim, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I mean, how are you making that balance with your clients when you talk about building their brand? Are you trying to introduce anything that would perhaps present some kind of friction in the process that adds premium value, that takes it out of the hands of the common person, and balancing that with the ease of use and the ease of access? I mean, how do you handle this in your day-to-day operations?
Yeah, sure. I would say in general, I'm more in agreement with Joe. Well, I love a good provocative opinion. I still believe for the most part, people are looking for less friction in their lives, and that's generally going to be the way that you can add more value. But there's a truth that whenever there's any sort of mainstream trend, there's always a counter trend, right? We love digital music, but still people love vinyl. So there's always this counter trend, and that counter trend, it seems especially true to luxury items or premium items, as you mentioned, right? Like people are going to stand in line to get limited edition shoes. Well, that's not reducing friction, that's adding friction. They're harder to buy, harder to get, but that's what makes them worthwhile. So I can't think of any examples where we've deliberately added that for our clients. And I imagine for the most part, it's still almost always going to be better to remove friction. There's so much natural friction in the process, in the journey to be able to get people to buy. And when you remove that, it becomes much easier for people to spend their money with us. And that's usually the outcome. But I can see where there may be some opportunities, but it's much more of a niche thing than the mainstream, in my opinion.
So just to wrap this up, and let's just talk about this, Joe. Is ad tech, do you believe that ad tech, AI, the like, all those things that are designed to make the experience for the consumer that much easier, are all those things just, are they good? Are they always good, or can they also be bad in terms of trying to get a customer to want to participate in your brand experience?
Well, the example at the beginning of the article that Kate wrote, she spoke about South by Southwest was kind of overrun and inundated with all these scooters, and they were just, you would just hop on, hop off, and basically swipe your credit card or activate them, and they're motorized scooters, and then just leave them wherever you wanted to leave them, and people should not check their common sense at the door. It detracted from South by Southwest in the sense that, sure, it was helping people get from A to B, but it was like vermin. It was like one of the 10 biblical plagues. All of these scooters everywhere, half running you, off the road and on the sidewalks. So the thing is, it just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? I mean, we all know this. Everyone on this call, even people listening, know that we shouldn't be talking about technology for technology's sake. That said, and I actually wrote about this, and the only place I wrote about it in my new book, in Built to Suck, was I said there is no A or I in customer, but perhaps there should be. And I actually think, just like I always said the real role of Twitter was customer service, I think the real role of AI is in customer obsession, in customer experience, the ability truly to make our customers' lives easier, better, richer, and that's where we can surprise and delight them with suggestions, with recommendations, or with connections that they could never have made by themselves. Inject a little bit of premeditated serendipity into that customer experience. So I think technology, when used for its true purpose and when used strategically, absolutely can take that relationship to the next level. But unfortunately, as I remember this from college. One of my first professors said to me, "Marketing is common sense, but how many of us have common sense?"
Yeah, good point. Good point. And a good place for us to leave that and go on to the next topic, which is an interesting one because Scott Galloway, along with many other Facebook critics, are starting to voice a troubling analysis of Facebook's move toward both a single infrastructure for all their platforms. That's the news from a couple weeks ago, where they were talking about bringing Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and all the other platforms onto one common platform. And also their end-to-end encryption across the entire enterprise that would make it one big, safe, private place. Someone's moving papers. If they could stop doing that, that'd be great. Galloway suggests that this amounts to a WeChat-style power grab that absolves Facebook of all responsibility for activities on the platform while shielding itself from antitrust regulations. Now, Steve, this has caused a lot of distress at the company. There's been some high-profile exits recently. There's been a lot of people who are being very critical of this. Do you believe this assessment by Galloway? And if so, how will this impact both consumers and advertisers? What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, talking about Facebook is about, talking about like trying to talk about global warming. And I must disclose I own $5,000 worth of Facebook stock. Um, I thought that a lot of what had been written about all of this was fascinating. I thought particularly Galloway, but also Jay Baer wrote some wonderful stuff. And, I mean, Galloway said, I would like to give Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg broader reach and a more robust platform, said no person ever. And that's what's going on here. Which I thought was a great line. And, what a lot of those guys and others people are pointing out, I think they're right, is that this is another sleight of hand, that it's an attempt, talking about encryption, for instance, and bringing all his, apps and platforms together in the back end and encrypting them is really an attempt to do a number of things. Number one, to make it harder for the Europeans to split up his company, number one. Another is that marketing is moving, or at least the audience is moving, particularly younger audience, to messaging and stories, as opposed to a newsfeed. And the newsfeed the revenue is flattening out. And so basically he's trying to figure out how he can have a more powerful messaging platform. And everybody's saying what he's trying to do is mimic WeChat, which is a Swiss Army knife of messaging and other tactics.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting thing, and we can't gloss over that, Steve. I mean, that WeChat component, it seems that with all the things he's been saying recently, that this is exactly what he's going for. He's going for a platform that controls all messaging, all sharing, is completely private, and can handle transactions. And that's the real money-making opportunity. If they can get involved into, brokering transactions between brands and consumers and consumers and consumers and peer-to-peer selling and all the other types of opportunities that are available, that could be a real cash grab. It could be something much, much more valuable to the company in the end than the advertising model has been. Do you think it's a real possibility, or is this something that would never be able to fly under regulations or under both the European Union and the U.S. regulations and oversight?
I have no idea. I'd like to ask Randy Rothenberg what he thinks. I feel like we're standing at the bottom of a mountain that's so high that we can't see through the clouds to the top, and that basically, when he first paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, we all thought he was crazy. But in a way, that's one of his main platforms into WeChat, and that, right now, I was astounded to read that WhatsApp, I believe Messenger, Facebook Messenger has 1 billion uses a day, and it performs SMS. Like, there's more going on in Messenger than text messaging, which is insane. On the other hand, he's got regulatory problems. He's got perception problems even among the public who use Facebook. And, and he's also got the Amazon problem, which is unlike WeChat, he doesn't have transactions. People aren't buying things on Facebook really, directly. And so he's invented a currency now, which is really amazing, to have that part. We think Jeff Bezos is powerful. How about somebody who just invents a currency and controls our conversations and gets a crypto fascist elected president? I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. And through his, preferred stock controls the entire company. So I don't know. I think anything he's doing is really good for him and bad for us.
Does anybody here on this call, anybody believe that Mark Zuckerberg is really concerned about user privacy when he made that announcement about end-to-end encryption? I mean, Adam, what is your take on that? I mean, you listen to it and it sounds like, oh, good, he cares about us finally. He's going to give us end-to-end encryption. No, wait a minute. We find out there's an ulterior motive, don't we?
Yeah, he wants to encrypt it so that he can control all of it, and he wants to own all of it, which he's been a master at doing, of owning all of our communications and finding new ways to get access to data. it's a weird use of the word privacy when you read through everything. And Scott Galloway and Ben Thompson of Stratechery have both pointed out that what he's doing is taking strategy credits, where he's saying, well, look, I'm going to give users privacy, but really he's not giving you privacy. He's just allowing one-to-one networking or small group networking on the platforms that he already owns. He doesn't say, and by the way, we will stop harvesting these conversations for ways to sell you things. In fact, in the Jay Baer piece that Steve just mentioned, Jay predicts that he's going to start piling more ads into your messenger and into all your different one-to-one conversations. And we all know that's 100% true, right?
Right, and not only that. I mean, it's just like it's going to continue to be the type of ad product that it is today. I mean, despite your privacy, it's still going to be targeted toward your interests and your conversations. Just because it's end-to-end private doesn't mean that it's really going to be private to Facebook, does it? I mean, or are we assuming that it will be, and that this will be untargeted advertising, which is even more egregious in terms of its usage?
It seems to frustrate people much more.
I mean, there's also a number of interesting cul-de-sacs or side roads on this journey to oblivion, which is a lot of the smaller brands that I work with. Besides email, which is very powerful, which by the way scares the heck out of Zuckerberg's email because he doesn't have any control of it. But one of the smaller techs is use micro influencers, which are people who have maybe 10,000, 5,000 followers, but they're seen as experts among that social circle that they're in. And you can get them to activate for a brand without spending money on them by giving them attention or rewarding them with product, which is a really powerful tool. Because if you can aggregate, say, 100 or 1,000 of them, and they're very authentic in terms of the people that they influence. Well, I think he's looking at that too. I think he's looking at private messaging and what WeChat's doing is sort of conversations that he wants to get his arms around more, and to and obviously to get the data from. There's another interesting example, if we have time, but which is, I don't know if you guys, but when you're riding an Uber or a Lyft these days, I have all these conversations with the drivers, and Uber and Lyft are not listening to those conversations, and we talk about all the ways we're being ripped off by their boss. And I end up getting all kinds of great tips from the Uber drivers about how to beat the system. And then I'm always trying to explain to them from a digital standpoint how they're being ripped off by the algorithm. And there's nothing that Uber or Lyft can do about that conversation unless they start tapping, into my car, which I'm sure is coming. And I think in a way that's, kind of an analogy to what the problem Zuckerberg's facing in terms of private conversations.
Tim, I know you've got to have an opinion on all this. I mean, what's your take on Facebook? Is there a way to stop them, or is this a move going to be inevitable? Is this something that we just can't stop and we just need to make our peace with it and try to figure out how to best navigate the world with Facebook in charge?
Yeah, probably the latter. But if at the end of the day, if there's anything we wanted to do to stop them, it would mean we all have to stop using Facebook. And it all comes
and
back
that's a bigger ask than just stopping using Facebook, because obviously we'd have to stop using Instagram and we'd have to stop using WeChat, and suddenly it becomes a real hassle to take all these moves and eliminate all these
Facebook
platforms.
Incorporated, the whole conglomeration of all of it, right? And going back to our previous conversation on reducing friction, well, they've done a very good job of weaving themselves in. I mean, I log into most of my online accounts via Facebook because it's easier than remembering what my password is supposed to be on that account. They make it simple, and at the end of the day, I still find it valuable. I still check Facebook. So as long as they're providing value to people, they're still going to be there. And so we can regulate it to death. We can hope that they can come around and take ownership. I think, whatever they do, to a degree, you're going to have some people not liking what they're going to do and questioning what they're going to do. So I will give them a slight benefit of the doubt in that I don't know that there's much that they could possibly say that's ever going to appease people, because if they don't have the data, then the advertisers aren't going to be interested in advertising with them anymore. There's some sort of balance that they want there, right? And I don't know. That's it. I liked the way Steve talked about it. It's just such this giant, huge thing that I don't know that we're ever going to be really. There isn't a simple solution, no matter what we do.
I don't know. I don't know who said it of you guys that whatever's good for Mark Zuckerberg is bad for us. But I think that's a really brilliant soundbite and quote. And you know, I was on the way into South by Southwest. I was sitting on the plane, and Elizabeth Warren was sitting in front of me in coach, right in front of me, and she, I think she was writing her speech. The speech that everyone, you know, that the whole tech world has been up in arms about. By the way, she needs a screen protector or privacy protector, which is ironic because here we are talking about privacy as well. And, you know, the whole thing, I wanted to say to her, you don't need to break up the large tech companies. They'll probably break apart themselves because, you know, they'll get to a point where they're where they basically are so kind of at odds with the world and with consumer perceptions and consumer expectations that something's got to give. I will tell you that I was at a couple of events, and you always, you know, Tim, Steve, like all of you guys, you always see the tchotchkes, and the tchotchkes kind of indicate sign of the times. Well, the number one tchotchke that I'm seeing being given away now are those camera protectors now that sit on your computer, and basically, you know, instead of putting tape on your camera. And I think that people are starting to get immensely freaked out, especially in this era now of, you know, smart devices and smart speakers, where they're having conversations with other people, not consumers, with humans, and suddenly they're watching, and suddenly they're seeing ads that are eerily similar to the conversations that they had from speaking, not even typing. And so, you know, the more we try and consolidate and bring together in order to better serve the user, the more freaked out they're going to get. And ultimately, you know, and there's going to be a tremendous backlash. And I think it's pretty obvious.
That goes back to the first conversation, the first topic of the evening. You know, it's just like, are we creeping out the audience by making things a little too easy for them? You know, it's just like, that's something to consider. Someone had one more thing to say.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, I got one of those free tchotchke screensaver things, the kind that you slide left and right, and I put it on my laptop, and it busted the pixels in my monitor, and I had to have the monitor replaced. So I'm back to a sticker now.
Yeah, I tried to use one as well, and I couldn't close my laptop anymore, so it didn't really make any sense.
I think perhaps I closed it too hard.
Well, recent studies show that upward of 71% of consumers are frustrated that their shopping experiences aren't more personalized. This is something we've known for a long time. Everybody wants a personalized shopping experience, right? But when asked whether they would be willing to be tracked to make this personalization possible, only 17% were okay with it. Adam, this is an age-old problem. I mean, goes back to the beginning of digital marketing. What do we need to do to reconcile this disparity today? What are you doing right now to try to make it so that people are more willing to be tracked and give them the service that they want in their ad experience?
Well, the biggest problem of all this is what we just came from, which is talking about privacy. And people seem to all understand that they're being tracked everywhere they go when they're using Facebook or other digital services. What I think they really do get frustrated about is when there's a disconnect in what it serves them. So I do get creeped out when I was talking about a specific brand, and then I get an ad served to me about that brand, and I have no other way I don't remember a way that Facebook should know that. But at the same time, when I get an ad that's not relevant, I get really upset. So what do we need to do to reconcile this whole situation, I think, there has to be a level of transparency to consumers, not the four gentlemen on this call or the people listening, but to just consumers. My mom, her understanding of what tracking means and what is really being captured and what happens in a data warehouse and how a pool of data in Heroku all works together and starts communicating back and forth, your credit score and your Facebook likes and your Google searches. It's actually scarier than consumers think, and it's at the same time, it's much less scary than consumers think because nobody is looking for you specifically. They can just find you if they really, really wanted to.
You know, the thing about direct marketing is it's always been scary. I mean, we're not talking
True.
about
That's right.
a new thing. I remember way back in the day, early 90s, being in a meeting at an agency as we're talking and laughing about all the stuff we knew about our banking customers and how, well, we can't say that, or we can't use this transaction, or they can't do this because we didn't want to be creepy. But the fact is, if consumers knew how much information we had on them, it is really super creepy. But we've made peace with it. We continue to use it, and it continues to work. I'm really not sure that there's any solution to this. I mean, Tim, what's your experience in the field?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about what Adam said about when he gets an ad that's not relevant, that he gets really upset. Because for me, I just ignore it. I think most ads aren't relevant for me. And it's been that way my whole life. So, there's just this weird truth that, if the data is there and it's tracked and you get a relevant ad, that's good. I don't necessarily look at the opposite of that as a bad thing. I haven't had lots of conversations with people where they're saying, man, I'm upset that this ad didn't get me. That's just not a conversation I've ever been a part of.
That's fair too.
Yeah, but you do hear people all the time complain about, well, this ad's constantly following me, or this ad. I mean, and it's not always a relevant ad. I mean, it's just like, it may be you looked at something or you accidentally clicked on something, and then that ad follows you around. But it's like, it's a bad ad experience, and people complain about that stuff all the time.
When I do get frustrated is actually when I've already bought the thing and I continue to get ads served to me for that thing. Like, to me, that just I think that's maybe a professional annoyance, and that I feel like we should know better. We should have the data that I actually already bought that, and so stop retargeting me.
Yeah, because that's what we need to do. We need to put our transaction database and expose it to web data. That'll solve everything.
Bob, you asked what we need to do to reconcile it. That's what we need to do. Everybody just upload their whole purchase history.
Well, just if my phone already heard me talking about the fact that I wanted to buy it, they should hear me opening the package later on and talk about using it.
Let me first of all, this comes up on the show over and over again, and I just want to be clear. Every single technology expert that I've talked to or heard speak about this subject says that there is no indication in the software when you decompile the software that any of these apps are listening to you and taking that information and using it against you. I mean, it's just like Facebook is not listening to you.
Yeah, it's totally like we've all just had that experience, and now maybe
right. It's because the algorithm is so good and it's dealing with so much data, and you don't know how many other places that Facebook is watching because you use that Facebook login so ubiquitously. You have no idea what the totality of their information on you is.
Well, and here's one specific example, right? I remember a couple months ago, I went to Best Buy, and I hadn't thought of shopping for a speaker, and I happened to be in that section of the store, and I went up and I was looking at the Bose soundbar that goes on front of a TV, and I pressed the little button that plays an audio demo. So this audio demo is playing, and then I left, and I didn't Google it. I didn't look up how much it would cost on Amazon or anything. I just did that. And then for the next week, I was getting ads for the Bose soundbar. It actually happened.
Whoa, that's creepy.
I looked in the other way, and I always felt like it somehow registered the demo. Like, technologically, it would be possible for it to have heard that sound demo and known that I was somehow demoing that in the store. Whether they really did or not, I don't know.
It's just as likely. It's just as likely they've put together a series of steps that an individual takes right before they become interested in a Bose soundbar, and that's
I have
maybe
read
they
a
just
lot
knew
of,
I was in Best Buy.
Yeah,
I've read a lot of articles about this, and there's always a way that it can be explained away. Sometimes it's a lot of gymnastics, but there's always a way. So in that case, the phone that you were carrying could have put you in Best Buy. Maybe the phone had a Bluetooth where it pinged off of the device when you were activating the device, and
sure.
there's always a backstory, but it's very suspicious every single time.
I'm not sure that's better than listening.
Yeah, true.
I wanted to go back to the business about people targeting you when you've already bought the product and annoying ads, I guess, the general question. In marketing online, when you're putting together hit lists for retargeting, the rule is you always eliminate people who bought it, which from your own site. If you're an e-commerce site, if you sell on e-commerce, so that's a mistake. That's a professional mistake, and I think, and then retargeting is really, or abandoned carts is a really important part for online retail. Because something like 60 to 70% of the people get to the cart and don't buy.
Yeah, 70% cart abandonment is the industry figure as far as I know.
I have one client that only gets 10% because the product is so expensive, and people are comparison shopping and freaking out about the price and whatever is happening. But what's important in retargeting ads is that it tells you a new story. I mean, it goes to content. It tells you a new and better story and explains why you might, if it can detect or it can guess why you abandoned, it tries to explain to you, argue with you about why it actually is a good product. So I think some of this, I mean, obviously this has been true always since the beginning of advertising, but stupidity produces annoyance, I mean, and if you're a smart advertiser, particularly in the digital age, you can avoid some of these problems.
You know what happens to me? I'll be on AA.com, on American Airlines website, and I'll be researching a trip, possible trip, and then I kind of leave for whatever reason, and then I get an email in my inbox from American going, there's still time to complete your trip to San Francisco, whatever the case may be. And I look at that and I'm like, that just doesn't make me feel good at all. I mean, I get what's happening. I'm in the business, but it's kind of dirty. And I think that really what's happening is finally technology is allowing us to actually put the right message in front of the right person in the right place at the right time. But it's almost like because of all of our bad behavior and because of all of our worst practices up until this point, consumers, I mean, the leash is very, very short right now, and the patience is very, very thin. And I don't know that consumers are going to stick around and give us that leeway to actually get it right, or at least to kind of take this high road with this gift now that we've been given.
Yeah, I think Joseph, I think that's exactly right, and I think the problem is that we are so inundated that even if somebody follows good practices, they are seen as bad practitioners. You know what I mean? I think you're right.
Well, speaking about good practices, at long last, almost all of the major U.S. TV networks are now on board, finally, with a common standard for addressable advertising. Tim, how significant is this move, and how will it change the media landscape?
Yeah, it's really significant. I mean, anytime we can all start running the same direction, I think that's a good thing. I remember when I was young, I had a Betamax VCR, right? And I don't think the Beta versus VHR wars
You were the one.
Anybody good?
You were the one.
I was the one, right? And so now I ended up with an obsolete video collection. And I'm not a media guy, but I can tell you that the folks in our media practice at RPA are very excited about this. It's worth noting that it isn't a standard yet. It's a consortium to figure out what the standard should be, which is kind of like having a meeting to talk about what the next meeting is going to be about, but baby steps. Overall, it's a good thing. And our media team's been talking with networks about this for a while now. And overall, we're very bullish on addressable's promise across, not just people who are in the market right now, but really across the full customer journey. And addressable TV is going to be a huge part of that. It's what Joe said on the last question. He said, technology is finally allowing us to get to the right person with the right message in the right place at the right time. And when you can target those right people and connect with them with, relevant and meaningful creative they actually care about and that resonates, not that doesn't freak them out or creep them out. That's what we're working on doing regularly for our clients, and getting addressable TV to a place where there's a common standard. That's going to be fantastic. It's going to help us actually get there. So yeah, I think all kinds of good things.
Joe, you probably know my opinion on this. I mean, I really believe that measurement is what drove digital into the race to the bottom, and I think it's going to do the same thing with TV. What's your thoughts? Do you agree more with the enthusiasm around this subject, or do you think that it could be potentially detrimental to the TV networks?
I mean, again, it's an exact run-on and continuation of what we just said on the previous topic. This idea of if there's ever been an industry that has been so slow to move and innovate, it's got to be, it's got to be the grand poobah of them all, right? The cash cow, the ultimate cash cow, which is television. And I think we're going to find out that it's too little, too late. Yes. There is merit in standardization, right, and in a standardized metric. But what's really happened with television, and what a lot of digital people didn't realize, is the thing about TV. You can love it, you can hate it, you can hate to love it, you can love to hate it, but everybody plays by the same flawed rules and the same flawed standard. And because of that, everyone was kind of in the same boat. And digital just couldn't get its act together at the time to find that one standard and from a measurement standpoint. But with television now, I mean, boy, have we got our work cut out for us if we want to figure out how to save television advertising, and finally getting on that bandwagon. There's so much innovation that I mean, Steve and I were kind of like goes back to the days when with remember companies like Visible World trying desperately to create some kind of advanced, innovative product on television from an addressable standpoint, from a personalized standpoint, and from a measurement standpoint. And here we are in 2019, and congratulations, guys. Everybody's playing nicely for the first time and actually realizing, as they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But again, it's just my feeling is you find a bar, you the rising tide floats all boats. You kind of play by those same rules. The problem, of course, is the ship is going down.
Well, but Bob, what you said earlier about measurement driving the results into the ground, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that as digital marketing came up, everything was treated like it was direct response, and there wasn't any room in there for the other aspects of advertising, brand building, and everything between brand
let's
building.
Be honest. Let's be honest here with ourselves. There's digital marketing is still largely direct marketing. I mean,
right.
We can tell ourselves that we're using digital ads for branding purposes, but that's not what the brands are thinking. They're just thinking, oh, we get some brand bump, but what we're really looking for is our clicks and our conversions.
I think that's true, but that. Well, at the end of the day, of course, everything you want those to convert, but there's actually a lot of research out there that shows too that if you are running video campaigns at the same time as you're running a conversion campaign, the conversion campaign is likely to do more well. I think if we look at the fact that you can be addressable, if you can talk to different people at different times with a message that is going to resonate, even if they might not be in the market for a year or two, you can be more effective. We just have to stop looking at everything as if it is direct response. Otherwise, what's going to happen is exactly what you said.
I think that by adding the measurement portion into this equation, by adding the addressability, by adding in the opportunities for response through the ads, suddenly you're going to see brands demanding a lot more for their money because they've got the measurement. Whereas before, all they had was this Nielsen rating and eyeballs and the GRP, and that was how they based their buying on. I think that measurement is actually going to be the Achilles heel of television because it's going to show how ineffective it is in terms of a digital perspective, that is.
Well, also, Bob, people are sidestepping the entire thing by using premium channels. I mean, if you choose FX Plus or whatever it is, and I can't remember what show I watch on it, there's no commercials. It's not addressable. You can measure me, but you can't talk to me.
Well, someone's got a phone going off.
Yeah, sorry. That was me. Sorry.
Plus, I mean, Tim brought up the idea of you being able to capture the whole journey through addressable TV. And when I think about that, Bob, you push it even further, faster into measurement. And now what advertiser will be able to budget for spots that speak to a specific part of the journey, which, for a car brand, for example, how wide is that journey? How much does that cost? I fear what we'll end up with is kind of bottom feeding direct sales type TV that's going to make TV even worse to watch.
For me, the biggest concern, there's one big concern though, for me, it's just like, we've got all these networks have already put out their TV everywhere solutions. And so you've got people coming into this consortium trying to make something work with their existing investment as opposed to put something together that works really, really well. And I think that's going to end up with a lot of vanilla solutions that are not as effective as they could be, because that's going to be the pushback. There's already so much significant technology investment already on a path that doesn't support any kind of common standard. Should be an interesting few years. What do you think, guys?
For sure.
Well, it's time for the Ad Fail 5, but before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do their shameless plug. Starting with Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at thehmsbeagle.com. That's the home of his consultancy that he runs with Lynn Power. Tell us what's going on in your world. Joe, what would you like to promote?
Well, this is, without question, the single thing that I want to promote is the launch of my new book, my 5th book, which is called Built to Suck, The Inevitable Demise of the Corporation and How to Save It with a question mark, because I'm not sure that the corporation can be saved. I actually think, and the thesis of the book is that the corporate empire or the age of the corporation is coming to an end, and we're living through it. We're witnessing it. We're seeing companies starting to fail and to fall, certainly at increasing numbers. I talk about why this is happening. I talk about what, if anything, might be able to save the corporation. But most importantly, I'm really talking about what I would call the 5th industrial revolution, which is the entrepreneurial revolution. I would say that this is, without question, the best book I've ever written. I'm so proud of it. And certainly if you guys like some of the stuff that I put out, go check it out, builttosuck.com. When the URL was available, I knew it was meant to be, or obviously Amazon and wherever books are sold. And one more thing, which is if you're interested in reviewing it, I will send you a personally autographed copy, and I would be most grateful for your, for your thoughts. So yeah, that's what's going on in my life.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm really, really happy for you that you got this the latest book out there on your own. Next up, we've got Tim Leake. You can find him at rpa.com. That's the agency where he is the Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer. Tell us what's going on in your world, Tim. What would you like to promote?
I feel like I should mention Joe's book one more time because I'm not positive he mentioned it enough. But, I love you, Joe. You're great.
You beat me to it.
I will say
Built to suck. Sorry.
.com. This summer, I'll be speaking at the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, doing a talk called Ugly Cells, in which I'll be exploring the fact that we have an entire festival dedicated to celebrating beauty and craftsmanship. But we live in a world where people are increasingly ambivalent about beauty and craftsmanship, and in certain cases reject it completely as fake and false and too corporate. So if you're going to be in Cannes this June, I hope you come on Monday, the first day of the festival, and come say hi. And also on Thursday, RPA is going to, if you live in Los Angeles, we're going to be hosting, in association with the Cannes Lions, the 2nd annual See It, Be It event, which is an initiative to address gender imbalance in senior creative leadership. And that's going to be an amazing event this Thursday.
Well, that's really great. That's awesome, Tim. Look forward to hearing more about that as it comes closer.
Thank you.
Adam Pierno, you can find him at asu.edu. That's the home of Arizona State University, where he is an associate vice president. Tell us what's going on in your world, Adam.
Well, we haven't talked about anybody writing a book recently, so I figured I would tell you about mine. I just wrote a book too. My book is called Specific: How Brands Draw Inspiration from a World That Doesn't Want Anymore. And it kind of toes the line between what Joe and Tim both just said, that for brands that are just trying to start right now, all they get from people that are advising them are stories of the 4 brands that did it the old-fashioned way, and those ways are not possible anymore. Yeah, for most young brands, they can't just go on TV and buy a Super Bowl spot from many companies that are trying to become household names. So this looks at the way ideas travel today. I go into memes. There's a chapter on romantic comedies. I look at how Radiohead markets their music versus how a CPG does. And it's a lot of fun. It's kind of a wild ride. You get about 3/4 of the way through before it starts to really come together. It's like a Tarantino film.
What's the title again?
Wow.
It's called Specific, and you can get it on Amazon, or you can go to my website and read more about it at adampierno.com.
That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely got a lot of books on the list this week. And last but not least, Steve Wax, who does not have a book, but has a new agency called Bindle's Stiff. Tell us about the agency, Steve, and what would you like to promote?
Well, I was actually going to put a book I read, but that wouldn't be much fun for me. The first paragraph of our pitch is the shock trooper of the American expansion, the man with the bedroll on back who freelanced beyond the community redoubts, building the canals and roads and right-of-ways, spiking rails, felling timber, drilling oil, digging mines, fencing prairie, harvesting wheat, was the hobo. So that's our that's our positioning, and we don't even have a website yet. So we'll let you know when we do.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, that sounds interesting. What is the focus of the agency? Is it going to be doing experience?
We're working for digitally native brands and startups in all sorts of fields, everything from software to organic food, and taking a share and working for less fees and basically teaching them how to market themselves.
Oh, that sounds great.
And the other part of it is actually drawing on the IAB's long presentation on the new digital brand. Maybe the profile is Warby Parker is the biggest success, but people like Casper and stuff using a lot of the outsourced resources that they use, and we're bringing new ones in.
Well, fantastic. And you can find out more when his website's up. But until then, you can find him at LinkedIn, and I'll have a LinkedIn link on the show notes. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, it was found last week that an email validation firm used by email marketers called verifications.io, Adam, had its entire database of 809 million records exposed in plain text on the web. This is what gives us a bad reputation.
Do you know how happy Mark Zuckerberg must have been when it didn't have anything to do with Facebook at all?
You absolutely know that to be true. Speaking of Facebook had a terrible week, absolutely terrible week, Tim. A major outage across all their platforms seems to have been caused entirely by themselves. They were upgrading a server and it went awry and it took down everything. And the whole thing came on the same day that a criminal probe was launched into their data sharing practices. Not good over at the FB, is it?
No, and here we are talking about Facebook again. All I can say is I was just really frustrated. I just thought it was my feed because I kept trying to reload it, and it was just showing me the same 2 posts over and over again. And one of those posts was about Joe Jaffe's book, so it just stayed there permanently for the whole day until they got it going again the next day.
Hey, listen. In my defense, I was referring to the first book, Life After the 30-Second Spot, not the second book, Join the Conversation, not the third book, Flip the Funnel, and not the fourth book, Zero. And now
you've mentioned them all.
No, I'm kidding. But the one thing I will say is that this whole idea of corporations becoming so big that they ultimately are built to fail or built to suck. One of the questions that actually got asked of me a lot was, what about Facebook? What about Amazon? What about Google? What about those companies? And the fact is that Facebook already sucks, but most companies, age is ultimately another determinant. And it's unbelievable with Facebook. It's just incredible how many missteps and how many chances have they had right now. So if let me ask you guys a question. Would you, there was a time maybe 5 years ago, 3 years ago, where if anyone had said, will Facebook one day go the same way that MySpace went, or a lot of companies that ultimately declined, would anyone on this call bet against that happening for Facebook?
No, it's totally possible.
I mean, and that's incredible when you think about how many billion registered users do they have now, and this company just cannot get out of its own way. It's unbelievable.
I would bet, unfortunately and regretfully, on their success, continuing success.
Well, next up, we have during the midterm elections. Come on, this is supposed to be faster than this. What are we doing? We're having a whole nother conversation. You guys are doing this badly. During the midterm.
I finished quickly.
You finished quickly. That's the episode title.
During the midterm elections, the cool way to drive voter registration was to promote the use of turbo vote. In hindsight, that may have been a bad idea, Steve, with the National Association of Secretaries of State now urging political advertisers to stop recommending the service after thousands of voters were not accurately registered by this company. You know what? This is another bad thing when it comes to voter registration efforts. We tried so hard to make it easy on people and tried to take the friction out of things, and look what we end up with.
Yeah, well, as the Washington Post's slogan says, or mission statement is, democracy dies in the dark. I do think the story about this is really important, because the voter suppression is going to be the death of democracy in this country, and I think we need to pay more attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever the solution is, it should be the biggest story right now.
Next up, every brand that is still advertising on Tucker Carlson's Fox News show, Joe, needs to stop now. I cannot believe. Did you hear his rant this week? The one that was recorded on Bubba the Love Sponge, where he's talking about the fact that the rant was from years ago, but it went on about how women were subpar and not up to standards, and it was a terrible, terrible situation, and I can't believe anybody is still advertising on his program.
It's just incredible, and he's refusing to apologize, and just doubling down on this insanity. And as of this weekend, I think what's her name, Janine Pirlo or whatever her name is, she's been suspended or removed temporarily for her idiotic statements, and the only person advocating for her to come back are probably the same advertisers that are sticking with Tucker Carlson, and of course the president. It's pathetic.
And last but not least, YouTube and Instagram influencer Olivia Jade was dropped by Sephora after it was shown, Adam, that her parents were asswipes. Excuse my French. It's unbelievable, this story about how people were paying to get their kids into Ivy League schools and very competitive schools. In this case, Olivia Jade is at USC because of her parents, Aunt Becky, as people say, or Lori Loughlin, and her father, Massimo, whatever his name is. But what's your take on this whole situation?
God, don't even get me started. This swept up my entire university for an entire week just looking at it. Our charter is all about continuing to grow in excellence while allowing more accessibility and making it easier for students to learn and not harder. I think the real scary part about this story has yet to really hit the media, where we start to figure out all these CEOs and what this really means for our culture and our democracy. If all these people are buying their way in on the outskirts of the merit system that we all thought we were a part of.
But what about the influencer?
I don't care about the influencer.
Good, that was the correct answer.
By the way, I was looking for this in the last ad file, the thing about Tucker Carlson. Well, SNL did a skit on Laura Ingram's show, and they said brought to you by, and the companies were a fashion catheter company, the manufacturer of baptism kits for dogs, and a brand of whites-only eggs. It's just egg whites, and it's just for us. So those are the advertisers that are still sticking with Tucker Carlson. Now we know.
Now we know. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFel5. That's pound AdFel and the number 5. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.